Are you worried about Canada's labor market? Are you worried about where this is heading right now? Because that is the reason why interest rates are falling at the moment, is because the labor market is weakening.
Well,
Chrystia Freeland tried to proudly announce changes to adding secondary suites onto existing homes today. We found this ironic considering a new advertisement we heard on the radio that left us shaking our heads.
Let's take a look.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Brian Platt with Bloomberg. From what I can tell, since Parliament came back, the government has been trying to pass its capital gains Ways and Means motion, and it needs to pass this before it, or it wants to pass this before it introduces legislation. It's been delayed because of the privilege motions in the House, or the privilege debates. Are you getting worried that you may not have time to pass this capital gains legislation? There's obviously a ticking clock on this Parliament. Are you worried you're going to run out of time? And if so, what do you intend to do about that?
no, I'm not. I have confidence that at the end of the day, all of us who have the huge privilege of serving Canadians in Parliament need to and will recognize that our job when we come to Parliament is to work for Canada and Canadians. And that means not wasting precious parliamentary time with dilatory motions. It means having real debates about real issues and then getting down to a vote.
Not wasting time with dilatory motions.
Ladies and gentlemen, let the record show that the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, doesn't regard $400 million in misspent conflict of interest money as a real issue.
Yikes.
And on the legislation you mentioned, we had a vote in June. There was a clear majority of MPs elected by Canadians in support of that measure, and I'm confident that we will be able to proceed. I really think, I think Canadians do not like their parliament being made into a spectacle. I think Canadians do not like Parliament behaving in a way that, as a mother, I would consider totally unacceptable if my kids told me that was happening in the playground or the gym at school.
Excuse me.
Wait a minute, this is from the lady who was making fun of Pierre wearing makeup.
The reason they're behaving like this is because you guys won't turn over evidence to the RCMP. You guys have permitted Canadians' taxpayer money to be spent frivolously and given to people who are in clear conflicts of interest. Like, there may be some criminal stuff going on. We don't know because we can't see the reports yet.
And neither can the RCMP.
Right.
Yet you keep lying to Canadians saying the RCMP has all the documents. We don't know what the Conservatives are talking about. So if you give over a whole bunch of documents and they're all redacted, guess what, guys? That doesn't count.
And it's not just the Conservatives that pushed so hard to get these documents released. The Bloc and the NDP have as well.
They all voted for this.
Right. So, the Speaker really had no choice except to say, okay, no government business until you guys hand over these documents. But here's the thing that just boggles my mind is whatever's in these documents is so serious, is so damaging to this party or the people in it that the government has wasted so far 8 days now.
8 days now.
Well, Wednesday will be 8 days. And they're just allowing this to continue.
They are sacrificing their time to get motions or bills like this through because they would rather not hand over the documents and they would rather protect themselves and protect the people that they appointed to the SDTC that were found to be enriching themselves by saying, oh, what's a good company to award these hundreds of millions of dollars to? Oh, I know, mine. Like, this is what has been going on, and this is why this is blown up. And it has frozen Parliament because the Conservatives and the Bloc and the NDP, you don't hear them about complaining about this. It's only the Liberals.
And you can frame it like this. It is more important to the Liberals that they keep these documents from the RCMP than it is for them to be able to put forward their Ways and Means motion that permits them to change the capital gains tax rate.
Right. So
What's in these documents?
this is a clear case of, if you have nothing to hide, then why are you hiding it?
It is just, it's not okay. We have serious disagreements in Parliament, and everyone here is prepared to debate the issues seriously and reasonably. And I am prepared, I think reasonable people can disagree with the specific policies we put forward, and I am happy, and all of us are happy to debate them on the merits of each of our policies. But what we're seeing the Conservatives try to do to our House of Commons, turn it into a place where the currency is not real debate. The currency is, nursery school insults, and the currency is dilatory motions. I think that really cheapens our country and cheapens our democracy. And I really have faith that Canadians are not amused, are not impressed by this, and that the majority of working with the majority of parliamentarians, we will succeed in moving past this.
You want to know what cheapens our country and our parliament is when our government is refusing to hand over documents to the RCMP because they're worried it would lead to criminal charges.
Well, and you have cheapened our entire economy and the value of our dollar over the last 10 years, Freeland. That's what we're seeing. Canadians are getting paid half as much in terms of value than the Americans are. This is what we're talking about. And then you're wondering why things are so expensive.
Well, we pay a disgusting amount of taxes. I can't recall the exact number off the top of my head. We did a video on it previously.
43%.
It's between 43 and 46%. I think the average for the country was about 44, but let's say between 43 and 46.
So when almost half of your paycheck, almost half of every single dollar is going to taxes, hello? And you're saying that, you don't think the majority of Canadians are amused of what's going on in Parliament? You know what? They're not. But they're sure as heck not pointing the finger at the Conservatives.
No, especially considering this dilatory motion is involving the NDP, the Bloc, and the Conservatives. It's all the opposition. They all want you to hand those papers over.
And a speaker that is so partisan that he doesn't call you guys out for anything, yet he's willing to not stand in the way of the bus for this one. So that's something else that everybody should consider.
I also want to ask you about the economy. You talked this morning about inflation being low and interest rates falling, but the flip side of that is that the labor market is worsening, and it does stand in contrast to the U.S., where they had a big surprise increase in jobs last week. Are you worried about Canada's labor market? Are you worried about where this is heading right now? Because that is the reason why interest rates are falling at the moment, is because the labor market is weakening.
Well,
yes, as sad as it is, we did call that. We did say that it is not necessarily a good thing that interest rates are coming down because it is a sign of a weak economy.
Yeah, but these are the things that they don't want to talk about.
No, of course not.
Right? They're trying to say, well, the Conservatives don't want to talk about falling interest rates. They don't want to talk about falling inflation. What happened is our economy hit a threshold where there was so few jobs being generated that everything just started to plummet because our productivity was plummeting. And it was plummeting over time. We are at a historic low for GDP per capita. And no wonder, it's because you bring in all these people and there's no jobs.
Well, and that's it. That's why you see, 90,000 jobs were added in, what month? I think it was maybe April. don't quote me, but you see a month where there's 90,000 jobs added, but the unemployment rate either remains unchanged or
it
even
goes
ticks up just a little bit by like 0.1%. And that's because so many new people are coming into Canada that all these jobs gained are offset now by all these additional people who are seeking jobs.
So, the answer should be, yes, we are concerned, but she's probably going to say, oh, well, we have a AAA credit rating.
Oh, probably something like that.
Actually, interest rates have come down because the Bank of Canada has taken a decision to move interest rates down. And I will...
Is she serious?
What?
Is she serious?
Does she... Freeland, I know you had to do a lot of reading as a journalist. Did you read how the economy works? What?
Like, I'm trying to think of a comparison to what she just said. It's kind of like...
Well, it's like this. Well, we don't need farms anymore because our grocery stores are full of food. That would be the equivalent.
Yeah, I guess that would be the equivalent.
Like, she's so stupid.
Like, it's just so ridiculous. I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing because I cannot believe this woman.
Like, yeah, we know that only the Bank of Canada can reduce interest rates.
But they base it on the information that's made available to them.
Right. And what the guy from Bloomberg, and it sounds like they know a heck of a lot more about the economy than you do, is saying, listen, inflation isn't coming down and interest rates are not coming down because you were doing a phenomenal job with the economy, Freeland. And what we didn't show you earlier, because it's 20 minutes of gaslighting, you're welcome, is she was going on and on and on about the fact that, we were the first, country in the G7 and the second country in the G7 and all this to reduce interest rates and inflation and all this crap. And it was because of our fiscal responsibility. Like, what does it say that you're still, spending in a $40 billion deficit and interest rates are still coming down? What does that say? It says that things are pretty bleak in this economy. That's what it says. And that's what the guy from Bloomberg is putting in front of her.
Well, and the gentleman from Bloomberg would know. I highly respect their work when it comes to finance.
We've sourced it many times.
Yeah.
refer you to the Bank of Canada's rationale for lowering rates. But the bank does tend to be very focused on where inflation is in its decisions on interest rates.
Many unbearable hours later.
So that's kind of where I see the inflation and interest rate dynamic. Certainly, jobs and incomes are something we watch really, really closely. One of our focuses during COVID was to try to help Canadian businesses preserve as many jobs as possible. We didn't want people out on the streets. We didn't want them to lose their connection to their job. And one of our focuses post the COVID recession has been to help get more jobs back faster. And I'm really glad that we have 1.3 million more jobs in Canada than we had before COVID. And I'm especially glad that for 19 months, wages have been outpacing inflation. But getting back to the start of your question, if your question is, do I still have concerns about the macro environment? For sure. I think it is very important to respect the independence of the Bank of Canada, and I certainly do. But I think your question points to some pressures that the economy is still facing at a time when interest rates are still, meaningfully above their neutral level.
So it seems like a lot of the things that she said in that segment were not correct.
Well, they may be correct.
Maybe they were
But she's-
technically correct, but she's missing the details.
Well, she's left a lot out.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's just pick on one of them. 1.3 million jobs, 1.3 million more jobs since the beginning of COVID. How many more people have come into Canada since the beginning of COVID?
Well, that was almost 5 years ago. So
So we're talking about probably close to 4 or 5 million people, because
Probably at this point. Yeah.
because you're talking about roughly 500,000 for the Century Initiative in
For
terms
the
of
permanent
immigration.
residents, yeah.
And then you're talking the rest of them that fill out temporary
Students.
foreign workers and students.
Yeah, students could work up to 40 hours per week until recently. International students, not Canadians who were born
Right.
here.
And this is one of the reasons why you have, I think it's double-digit unemployment for youth, because you
Yeah.
have all of these different classifications of students now competing for jobs because they overloaded all of the foreign students coming in. And you also have all these temporary foreign workers that are taking jobs that students would normally have.
And I recall during one of the interviews that we did recently, the individual was telling us that students, you have these students kind of like competing, like the employers are competing, like pitting these students against each other, going, okay, you're permitted to work 40 hours per week on your visa and you're only permitted to work 20 hours per week on your visa. Well, we're going to take the person who can work 40 hours per week. So even the international students,
They're getting screwed over.
yeah. Like, and that's to say nothing of the Canadian students who were born here.
So if you're watching this on Wednesday, October the 9th, check out our interview that is coming out tomorrow with Conservative candidate Emily Brown, and this is where we get into that.
Hi, Rachel Haynes from CTV News. Minister Freeland, the Bloc demand remains the same about the OAS, but your government didn't support their motion last week, and I'm going to put something to you that Minister Duclos said yesterday, which is what the Bloc is proposing is not the right way to proceed because it gives more money to affluent seniors than to low-income seniors. Has your government shut the door completely on this demand?
So as I said, I always agree with Jean-Yves. We actually work very closely together. A collaboration, a partnership that was really forged during COVID and the COVID committee. What I would say about the Bloc is we believe truly in having an open door to cooperation with all parties in Parliament. And we have been having some very productive, very sincere conversations with the Bloc. In fact, Jean-Yves and our House Leader and Steve McKinnon and I had a long conversation last week talking about their proposals, getting an understanding of what were the core issues that were important to them.
So this is funny. Because this goes back to something that Yves Blanchette said last week when he was actually asked, because the Liberals are like, oh yeah, we're talking the Bloc about this and everything like that. And when he was asked, so, we've heard that there's some conversations going on. How are those going? And he's like, yeah, the Liberals love to talk about all these conversations that are going on, but I've had none. So, sorry, Freeland, I don't believe a word you're saying. And I'm pretty sure by now you haven't told the Bloc that you're going to be going through with this and giving their bill royal assent. So guess what they're doing right now? They're having conversations between the different opposition parties on how to take down your precious little government.
They sure are.
And putting forward from our own perspective what we think are the core issues that are important for Canadians, for Quebecers. It was a fruitful conversation, and we are very open and keen to continuing that discussion with the Bloc. At the same time, we continue to have very fruitful and productive and constructive conversations with the NDP. I'm in close touch with my counterpart. Many of my colleagues are in close touch with their counterparts as well. We're proud of our government's record in passing some historic legislation for Canada and Canadians, working collaboratively with the NDP.
Imagine what must be going through her head when she's sitting there saying, we're really proud of what we've achieved as a government. Like, when you look at the state of Canada.
Has she seen their track record for the past 9 years? I mean, I just look at my life now compared to when Harper was prime minister, and everything is worse, everything is harder, and I know that I'm not the only one. We hear it every single day from our viewers that, you know, we have no money left at the end of the paycheck. We're having trouble paying our rent or our mortgage. They just put out a health warning to doctors to keep an eye out for scurvy in patients in Canada, because that's how bad things are getting. That's how expensive food is. The Canadians can't afford to eat something with vitamin C in it every day. Like, sometimes you hear of it in very, very extreme cases. Like, I remember reading a study, and I think it was out of the States a while back, where a gentleman ate nothing but ice cream for something like 9 months and ended up with scurvy. Like, this is the kind of extreme levels of malnutrition that you have to go through usually in order to get scurvy. And they're starting to see it on the rise here in Canada.
Dental care, free contraceptives, free diabetes medication, also the green industrial transformation investment tax credits. These are really, really important measures that are, transforming Canada in a positive way. We did that working collaboratively with the NDP, and we're definitely having conversations with them as well about ways that we can continue to work together.
Thank you. Are you bringing up the fact that you're talking with the NDP because you're going to start courting their support again, because you are saying no to the bloc and you're not going to be meeting this OAS demand?
Good question.
Okay, CTV. Good question.
Yep.
Good question. Because they're not going to be giving in to the bloc's demand, because that would put them over their guardrails, and the fact that they haven't been able to pass the capital gains tax yet means
They're already like 20 billion over their guardrails.
so.
Like, that's a huge number.
It is. It's a massive number. So, anyway, that's the only reason she'd be bringing up the NDP.
Not at all. We really take as our starting point what is good for Canada and Canadians. Our starting point is talking to actual Canadians, talking to individual Canadians in our constituencies, talking to people who represent them. I've been having good conversations with union leaders and business leaders. I know my colleagues have as well. And with that as a starting point, we are then really open to looking for partners in this Parliament so that we can get the work of Canada, the work for Canadians done.
Okay, this is so stupid. We're looking for partners. We're not just bringing up the NDP. We're looking for partners. Okay, you know who your partners are? The NDP and the Bloc.
And the Bloc have already said that, they're done. So
you have the
that
NDP.
leave?
Like, you're going to go to the two Green Party people to support you in your motions? Like, you don't care about them.
Well, and the thing that upsets me the most is she's going on saying, we're listening to the voices of the people. It's the average Canadian is getting nothing out of these deals with the NDP. So far, they're covering diabetes medication, which doesn't cover a huge percentage of Canadians. Not a large percentage of Canadians are diabetic. And also oral contraceptives, which you have to be a woman between age, let's say 15 and 35, because after 35, your risk of throwing a clot and dying increases. So,
Many of those women get free contraceptives early on anyway. So,
well, but not just that, but like, that's a very small subsection of Canadians that everybody's paying for. Let's look at dental care. Right now, it's people over, I think, the age of 70. Don't quote me on that number. But it is only seniors. So again, the vast working population of Canadians is paying for a very small subsection of Canadians. So that means like so many Canadians are paying into these programs and not getting anything.
And even these programs are not free, especially the dental care, as many people are actually finding out.
Kate McKenna from CBC News. Just to follow up on my colleague's question, will your government be presenting a counteroffer to the Bloc this week, one that boosts benefits for seniors but at a lower cost?
As I said, we have a real open door. We have been having constructive and very concrete conversations with both the Bloc and the NDP. I'd be ready to have conversations with the Conservative.
That's not what Blanchette said.
No. No, not at all. Not at all. But it sounds like going back to, we've been talking to Canadians. It sounds like they have been having conversations with Canadians that can't actually afford their mortgage. So we were out running some errands today and we were listening to the radio. And over the radio, we, heard like just this ad, and it was, you're not really paying attention too much. But it was weird because it was this guy talking about getting a cup of coffee and having a spoon of sugar, but then someone gave him a spoon of salt instead. And he was like, oh, well, I'm pretty distracted. And then it said, if you're, really worried about your mortgage, consider talking to your bank and yada, 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 and all this stuff. And then we're like, okay, in your head, you're like, is this RBC? Is this Scotiabank or anything like that? And then we were shocked because none of those bank names came up. What came up was, if you're worried about your mortgage, blah, 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 do this. This has been a message from the government of Canada.
Yeah, it was like dystopian, that they are anticipating so hard that the vast majority of the population is not going to be able to afford their mortgages, that they feel it's necessary to put ads on the radio.
Yeah. And they've also updated the government website to reflect this. So if you need mortgage relief measures, talk to your bank. Your bank can be expected to offer some mortgage relief measures, combination of things, and it goes through all these options. Maybe you can get an extended amortization period and, just pay more money over the long run, but try to reduce your monthly payments. So that's an option too, everybody. And then the most, I think, vindictive option that they actually have here is consider selling your home and then take all that money and then go out and pay astronomical amounts of rent and then piddle all of your equity away.
This is how our government thinks it's helping citizens. It's created economic conditions so harsh that Canadians are having trouble paying their mortgages. And its advice is, well, maybe you should sell your home.
Well, that's one way to solve the housing supply issue, isn't it? If you make things so unaffordable that people can't afford their homes, maybe other people will buy them until they can't afford them, and then on and on and on and on and on we go.
Like, this is insane that this government, number one, again, created these economic conditions that are so bad that Canadians are having so much trouble affording their homes. And then number two, it thinks that it has to spin up a page on its website on how to help Canadians get through this, because there's something like, over 300 foreclosures a day?
Yeah.
Is that what we've read?
Yep. And the fact that they are literally spending government money for radio ads, and no doubt there's more than just radio ads out there, because people are so strapped and there's so many foreclosures that are going on and expected to come.
Yeah, like, this is such a necessary thing that the government has to make a website about it, or at least a page on its website for it, and then has to take out radio ads to advertise to Canadians. If you're one of the Canadians having trouble, then you need to go to our website. Like, it should have not gotten to this point. Like, this is insane. A healthy economy, proper fiscal policy from the government does not result in the need to have radio ads telling Canadians, if you're about to lose your house, here's a bunch of stuff that you can do, like that it's normal or something.
Well, and we're not even in the danger zone yet, folks, because remember, all of these foreclosures that are tragically happening now are happening from people that either took out variable mortgages over the whole COVID period, or people that bought before the interest rates skyrocketed. So they're coming to the end of their 5-year variable or their 5-year fixed in most cases. So all of the really smart people that bought during COVID are at really low interest rates right now because they're on a 5-year fixed. Well, next year is 5 years from when that COVID housing boom started. So these foreclosures that are happening now, they are going to skyrocket come next year, because you're going to have all these people that drastically overpaid. Trudeau said, don't worry about it, everybody. We're borrowing so you don't have to, and interest rates are at historic lows. So all of those people are going to be looking at paying probably 2 or 3 times their mortgage payments come next year. So no wonder they're starting to put these ads out there trying to get people to think about this before everything goes into the tank.
Well, the Liberals have created an even worse housing crisis because, I mean, we already don't have enough homes for everybody in this country. That's the current housing crisis. But now Canadians are going to be losing their homes due to the Liberals' irresponsible fiscal policies.
Right. And they're going to have to be selling these homes probably at a loss to what they bought them at, which doesn't help them because they're still going to have to pay off that difference.
Yeah.
So for those of you that may not know, let's say you buy a house for $1.2 million in COVID. Well, those were COVID prices when people were overbidding. So let's say you have a mortgage of, I don't know, $800,000. You managed to put down $400,000 on a $1.2 million home. Great for you. Well, here's the thing. Let's say you're only able to, sell that home for $700,000 now. Now you have a difference still owing to the bank after that transaction is done of $100,000.
Yeah, you're taking a loss of $100,000, and that's just out of pocket. That doesn't count the $400,000 that you've already put down.
Right.
So it's a $500,000 loss in totality.
So you're going to exit that with no money, still owing to the bank. How are you supposed to live anywhere for rent?
Rent in Toronto is going up to $5,600 a month is one stat that I had read on average. That's insane. I don't know anybody who can afford that. Like, how are Canadians supposed to be able to afford to live in this country?
So this is what's at stake here. And the Liberals obviously know that this is coming, and they're putting out these ads kind of like as a last ditch effort. And all they've announced is, well, we have a first-time home buyers tax-free savings account. That's so great, so people can start saving for their new home.
What about the people who are going to lose their homes? What's the advice? Sell your house? How flippant is that?
Or the other piece of advice is re-amortize to 30 years. So, if you're already 5 years in on a 25-year mortgage, they're like, nah, add another 10 years to that. 10 years. So this is where they're at, and she's curious as to why the Conservatives are taking all this time in the House. She's curious as to why the Bloc doesn't really want to work with them.
She's curious as to why they're down 20 points compared to the Conservatives and have been for a very long time.
Well, she may not have to be curious much longer because this government is not long for an election.